Let's be real, if it wasn't for the PC, there wouldn't be games. All games begin their life as a smattering of code plastered across a PC monitor. Both historically and today, this is true. This doesn't mean that these games are exclusive to the PC, but before they can even make their way to any other system, they first take shape here. While the main fixation of the game's market may be on home consoles, and this is what many will think of when you refer to video games, it is a plain and simple fact that the PC may be the strongest gaming system of all time. With literally decades of support from developers, it's possible to keep your games library expanding across your entire lifetime. From running a game in DOS before the age of Windows 95, to running Elden Ring on max settings on your RTX 3080, there's no finer system for gaming than the good old PC. Over the years, there have been more games released for PC than any other architecture, and in today's episode we'll be going over a huge range of titles from childhood nostalgia in Putt Putt Saves the Zoo, post-apocalyptic vacationing simulator Fallout New Vegas, to narrative-driven Mass Effect 2, or even the silly skeleton game Undertale. Of course, with most of us PC players utilizing Steam, the absence of mentioning Half-Life would be nothing short of a sin. During an interview with Valve News Network in February of 2018, Gray Newell, the son of Gabe Newell, props, revealed some interesting information behind the iconic first-person shooter, specifically information that he was given directly relating to him. He revealed that the final boss of the first Half-Life, the Nihilanth, was actually not just created with the intent of scaring the player, but was created from the innate fears of his father. He stated, "The final boss of Half-Life 1, the giant evil baby monster, is supposed to be me. When my mother was in childbirth, they were thinking, what's really scary? And at the time, having a child seemed to be the most scary thing to everyone." But childbirth certainly isn't the only terrifying thing about us human beings. I don't know if you know this, but inside your body is a spooky skeleton composed of many bones, such as a skull. Just a little tidbit for you there. In Half-Life, there's an extremely rare chance that the game will actually throw an intentional scare at the player. Specifically, there is a 5% chance that if you manage to jib a human character, their skull will fly directly towards the game's camera, regardless of how far the player is from the target. Of course, the PC is the best way to play a point-and-click adventure game. Not too surprising, since the games involve pointing and clicking on things. The genre isn't quite at the forefront of the industry as it once was when we were kids, like with releases such as Putt Putt Saves the Zoo, a game that, despite clearly being made for children, has some rather gross little secrets. One of these secrets involves making a change to the game's files, by taking a look at hegames.ini, and adding a line which reads upchuck equals 71595, an additional animation can be seen in-game. If the player then makes Putt Putt eat 10 cotton candies from the chuck wagon, this will cause him to, like any normal car, vomit profusely. Luckily, no major cleanup will need to be involved, as canine companion Pep will assist by eating the fresh upchuck. Lovely. Another top-tier point-and-click title surrounding the world of motors is Full Throttle. Staying on the theme of cars, it's possible to see a particular car in the junkyard, which is actually modeled after a 1969 Pontiac Le Mans, a car that game designer Tim Schafer owned during the development period of Full Throttle. Schafer's car was placed into the game perhaps as a form of respect for the machine. But as he left the office for lunch one day, the engine exploded, causing the car to be set ablaze. After Tim returned to the office later in the day, he found out that the game's lead artist, Peter Chan, had added the car to a scene in the game. If the player decides to examine this car, Ben will even make a reference to the fate of Schafer's car, stating, "Fire damage. Forget about it." Now, if we had to pick a single statement to summarize our love of one particular celestial body, it is this.
We like the moon! 'Cause it is close to us!
But that isn't to say one can't have a bit of fun by trying to bring harm upon the Earth's largest natural satellite. In 1995, Bethesda created a video game adaptation of the Terminator series, which gave the player the opportunity to take down the celestial body with nothing more than a few bullets. During any nighttime level of the game, if the player shoots the moon 25 times or more, it will not only reveal a series of text prompts reading, "Ow," but the moon will fall straight out of the sky. It seems Bethesda enjoyed this little secret enough to even include it in the second Terminator game they released a year later, Terminator Skynet. Speaking of space, large masses, and the effect of things, Mass Effect 2 is a pretty sweet intergalactic adventure, with a story so rich in flavor that you might be surprised to learn it is not edible, unlike Tupari. On the Citadel, the player can interact with a vending machine which can be used to dispense the popular soft drink Tupari, with the machine playing a number of slogans to promote the beverage and entice consumers. One of these possible slogans is,
Tupari brings your ancestors back from the grave.
This is actually based on a popular real-world urban legend which surrounds Pepsi Cola. It was believed the Pepsi Generation slogan, "Come alive, you're in the Pepsi Generation," was misinterpreted in Chinese, or other East Asian languages, as Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the grave. Whether this was true or not is actually still undetermined, but the reference is still pretty funny regardless. Another interesting bit of wordplay in the game occurs during the Tail Treason loyalty mission, where Shepard is introduced to Admiral Zalcoris Vas Quibquib. The Vas Quibquib portion of this name is not actually part of their given name, but rather refers to the ship that he lives on. The name Quibquib could actually be named as a direct reference to the Fred Saberhagen sci-fi novel series Berserker, but it's possible for the player to further question Zalcoris about the Quibquib and ask why he's chosen not to transfer to a different ship with a more respectable name. In response, Zalcoris will mention that he had considered moving to a ship with a more respectable name, such as the Deferens or the Ictomy. With both of these other ship names considered, this would make him Admiral Zalcoris Vas Deferens. The Vas Deferens, for those who aren't in the know, is a tube of the male anatomy used to transport sperm around the testicles. His other option was Zalcoris Vasectomy, which similarly references the surgical procedure, the vasectomy. Another secret about Mass Effect 2 has to do with its difficulty, and this is a secret that even most of the game's team probably never knew. Christina Norman, one of the game's designers, made the executive decision to change a fundamental value in the game's difficulty settings without even telling anyone. The day before the game was finalized, she decided to increase all enemy health and damage by 20%. She didn't tell anyone about it until she revealed it on her Twitter account a whole 6 years later. While we're still talking about space things and BioWare, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 had some curious inspiration that might have been hard to notice. According to the artist behind the character Darth Nihilus, Brian Menz, the design was heavily based on the character No-Face from the Hayao Miyazaki film Spirited Away. Posting art of the character to his DeviantArt, Menz also wrote, "It was requested that I create a Sith Lord based on the No-Face character from the Miyazaki film Spirited Away, and that's what I came up with. Still, he's arguably the most recognized character I've worked on, other than the Vault Boy from Fallout." Well, if that isn't a convenient way for us to segue into some trivia for Fallout New Vegas, I don't know what is. The game's opening actually spawned not just a meme, but a mod, and then an official reference to fans' reactions, all in one fell swoop. During the starting moments of the title, the player is presented with a series of ink blots, with fans arguing that one of these images actually looks like two bears high-fiving, though sadly the game did not provide this option as a response. To correct this fatal flaw, Ted DeMann released a mod which would change the possible response to include the option to say that it is in fact two bears high-fiving. Obsidian picked up on these reactions to this image and decided to make a reference to this in the game's Honest Hearts DLC, with the introduction of a character named Two Bears High-Fiving. Speaking of mods being used to introduce new features in the game, one element of New Vegas actually has an error. The Feral Ghoul Roamer has an issue when being loaded into editing software. Though this isn't too big of an issue, as it doesn't cause conflicts within the game itself, the file attempts to draw from a model labeled MMM-Ghoulvariant v1.nif. What makes this particularly interesting is that this is one of the Feral Ghoul variants that was created for a mod of Fallout 3, called Mart's Mutant Mod. This would seem to suggest that Obsidian had actually used this mod as a way of experimenting with Fallout 3 during development of New Vegas, while they worked to develop new features for the game. And now it's time for a very, very different kind of RPG. Undertale was probably the hottest game of the last decade, whether you like it or not, with Toby Fox having worked on much of the game as a solo developer. Some of the work that he'd created for Undertale actually came from the basis of a previous game that he'd been working on, which was the basis of Deltarune, a title that the public only saw after Undertale. The musical tracks Throttle and Heartache were originally composed for the game that served as the basis of Deltarune several years before work on Undertale had even begun, but found their way into Undertale instead. Throttle was the main battle theme for the proto-Deltarune before it was replaced with Rude Buster, while Heartache was originally called Joker Battle, which would seem to imply that it was initially the battle theme for Jevil before it was replaced with The World Revolving. Another interesting small audio secret can be heard in Undertale, though specifically in the Japanese version of the game. In this localization of the game, Flowey's "That's a Wonderful Idea" voice clip had to be redubbed to a Japanese equivalent. Insert clip here. In response to a direct message sent on Twitter by VTuber Hosho Marine, Toby Fox confirmed that it was in fact he himself that voiced the Japanese line. Did you know that Doom 2016 was in development for so long that one of its developers had 4 children between the game's conception and its release? Or that Black and White 2 will whisper the player's name when somebody dies? For more PC facts, check out the video on screen. I love my PC. I just got myself a new one, finally upgraded to the modern age of RTX architecture. It's pretty cool, man. Though I haven't actually played many games on it yet, because I've been too busy talking about them instead.